Hey, what is up everyone? Danny here. Today I want to answer one of my viewers' questions on this YouTube channel, and they asked me, it caught my attention because it's a great question. The question was, should I be practicing my techniques on both sides? And the short answer is yes and no. Now let me explain briefly why I say so. So you didn't tell me if you're doing Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai, but let's take both as an example. I'm going to start with Jiu-Jitsu. Why you should practice on both sides? Well, that's plain and simple. You should be coordinated on both the left and the right side with most of your techniques. That's how I like to practice, at least personally. But now, the thing is, Jiu-Jitsu is a very complex, combat sport. It requires a lot of, coordination, and, especially when people are starting out, it takes a lot physically as well as mentally to comprehend how we do certain techniques. Let's use Jiu-Jitsu and let's say a guard pass, for example. If I'm teaching a brand new student and I'm showing him a basic guard pass, well, it's going to be complex at the beginning stages to teach them. So I'm always going to focus on their good side. So let's say if they're right-handed, they're going to be doing a pass on a certain side. And then only later on, at the later stages, will I try to focus on showing them the technique on the opposite side. Now, is it a good or bad thing to practice? A lot of coaches might even tell you in sports and athletics to always focus on your strong side because time is wasted. I heard a lot of old school boxing coaches that don't believe in training their fighters, let's say if they're right-handed, to train them on a Southpaw side, simply because they say that would be time wasted in perfecting the techniques and honing their skills instead of spending countless hours trying to perfect another side. But here's the thing. I'm not going to suggest you should be perfecting things on both sides. The best example that comes to mind right now as I'm speaking on this camera is I'm going to tell you a story. Many years ago, I went to a very famous jiu-jitsu gym in Atlanta, right? So I was training there. I think at the time I was probably a purple belt or maybe a brown belt. But I was training with someone and everyone in the mat area had told me, said, hey Danny, like this guy's guard is like world level. The guy competed at the Pans, at the Worlds, and he actually, when I was watching him, he had a really good guard. Like he had good reverse de la Rivas and stopping everyone. He was almost like unpassable, right? So eventually during the rounds, I was placed with him. So as I was trying to pass his guard, I usually pass towards my left side. And most people that have great guards, well, they're going to be used to someone passing on that side because most people are right-handed. So, knee crossing towards the right side as well. So you're going to be putting that reverse de la Riva hooks and whatnot. But nevertheless, I was having a difficult time trying to pass his guard. He did have a great guard. But during our match, I decided to switch my positions and use the same passing methods I was trying on him, but I did it towards my right side, which is his left guard. So, lo and behold, I passed his guard like a hot knife through butter. So the round restarts after the side control positions, and it wasn't going for submission. It was just like positional sparring. So we resetted the positions, and then again, tried on my good side, having a hard time, tried on my opposite side, passed once again very easily. And that happened for 3 times in a row. I passed his guard. So eventually I sat out, and one of my Japanese friends was actually rolling with the same person. And I remember seeing him having a difficult time as well passing the guy's guard. And I just shouted out to him, friendly, said, pass on the opposite side. And he did so, and he passed the guard again. So this is just a very short story to tell you that this is one of the reasons why I say yes. For Jiu-Jitsu, for example, you should be practicing on both sides. This is one simple fact. If you only practice guard passing on one side, yeah, you're going to get really good at that stuff. But the thing is, what if you get someone who's really good at guard retention and guard pass counters? They're going to have a challenge passing their guard because that's their game. So if you have both sides now, you can confuse an opponent or a training partner and start passing on their weak side. And that's going to make things so much easier for you. Now, going back to the story of the old boxing coaches that say you shouldn't waste time because you're not going to get as good and that's hours spent. Well, I'll add this to this. Although there is some good stuff about it, there's also the fact that, like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't think students should focus on getting as perfected on the weak side area. I'll say it this way. You don't need to get as perfect on your weak side as you are on your strong side. I just need to be good enough to pass your guard on your weak side. That's the thing. That's what I want to train. So when I start teaching students or when I practice myself, I always focus drilling on my good side, but I do also practice on my weak side. So if I'm using guard passing, I'll practice the same amount of repetitions on both the right and left side, simply because I know there might be a weaker side and some techniques are a little bit more funky on one side. But the thing is, there's an added bonus of focusing your techniques on the opposite side because, man, you have to teach yourself when that happens. You're learning the technique by your coach, your professor, you're seeing all the details, and you're doing it right on the good side. But then when you start repping on the opposite side, all of a sudden you start to freeze up and you have to stop and think how you're doing things. So your mind starts working double time. Where do I place my hand? Yeah, that's on the collar. Where does my knee? Where does the left foot go? Where is my elbow position? All those little details that make a big difference in techniques, now you have to start focusing more on the concentration side of how you should be doing those movements. So that's why I say, yes, you should be drilling on both sides. It's a very important thing, even though you're going to have in your mind, you'll know you have that go-to side in the back pocket at all times. Now, if I use Muay Thai boxing or kickboxing for that matter, the striking sports, being coordinated in both the Southpaw stance and the orthodox stance is really important. Let's say, for example, you're fighting Muay Thai and someone starts chopping your leg a lot and you just want to confuse them and switch to a Southpaw stance just so their leg kick doesn't have the same effect on the outside of your thigh. So now they're going to be exposed to kicking the inside of your right leg instead, and that will confuse a lot your opponent, okay, if that's a good strategy. But the thing is, once you start fighting Southpaw and a guy kicks on the outside or inside of your lead leg, which is your right leg now, maybe you haven't practiced in that stance. Now, how do you check that kick? Okay, if you're a Muay Thai practitioner, you know what I'm talking about is checking the lead leg kick with your lead leg is one thing, but checking with the opposite side leg, if you switch your stance, is the funky side. So if you don't practice that stuff, you're not going to be able to check effectively. And like I said in previous videos, we know about Muay Thai is if you check properly, the opponent will get hurt. But if you don't check properly, you're going to get hurt yourself trying to block that powerful kick. So that's just another great example of training both sides. That's why I always recommend it. Now, there's also the mentality where I even teach my own son Alex this way is I want him to focus 150% on enhancing his skill level into one stance, right? So for example, if we're boxing, I also want him to have that mindset that he could have that confidence to stay into his regular orthodox stance and be able to nullify most of the orthodox attacks as well as anybody who's Southpaw. Some of the greatest fighters in the world, they didn't mind training only on one side simply because they've sparred thousands of rounds with people who are Southpaw. I myself don't mind fighting Southpaws. When I was younger, I used to have a lot of Southpaw training partners. So I didn't necessarily always switch to Southpaw when I trained with those Southpaws. I stayed in my right-handed stance and I was able to deal with it. I developed a lot of good strategies against someone who was right-handed as well as someone who was left-handed. So that brings me to the next point is you should be practicing your techniques on both sides for that matter too, because you want to be able to understand how the opponent or even your training partner in sparring sessions is going to be placed in front of you. So if I'm sparring someone who's Southpaw, I want to be able to understand how the Southpaw reacts to my orthodox stance. So if I decide or I choose to stand in the Southpaw stance, I also know how the orthodox fighter will react to me. All right, it goes both ways. So then again, it really comes to a sense that depending on the style of martial art you're practicing, do you want to practice both sides? If you have time, yes. If you're training for a very important upcoming tournament or fight, well, training camp's going to restrict you from putting a lot of times on building new skills, for example. But if you do have a lot of time, you're just training recreationally, for example, definitely train on both sides of your techniques. It's a great thing to do. Plus, it will enhance your understanding of every technique you're doing because you have to train yourself, like I mentioned earlier, to teach yourself how to understand, how to position yourself properly to do it. You're going to be thinking, okay, on this side now, where did I put my right hand? So now it's on the left, my left hand goes here and whatnot. So you're going to be thinking those things, and while you're doing so, you're also teaching yourself the technique once again all over. So I think it's very beneficial to train on both sides. Now it does have a caveat in the sense that There are certain techniques where I'll tell my students sometimes where, no, this doesn't need to be trained on both sides. All right, there are certain techniques that don't waste your time, such as gripping, stand-up techniques, just drill everything. So if you're 25, 30 years old and you just started the sport of wrestling or jiu-jitsu, don't focus on doing a single leg or a double leg takedown on the funky side. Just focus on perfecting that technique on the good side. Because when you're going to be competing, you're going to throw your shots into the same stance that you're used to. You're not going to go into the opposite stance and try that shot. That's not going to happen, trust me. So there are certain positions where I would recommend just stay on your good sides. But I think it's very valuable for techniques such as when you're going to decide to pass someone's guard, or when you're going to be boxing to practice your techniques in the southpaw stance. There are some positions where I would recommend that no matter what, you should be always drilling on both sides, such as jiu-jitsu escapes. You know, if you're escaping the side control always on your good side, what happens when someone passes your guard on the opposite side? Now you're stuck trying to side control escape on the left side, and you've never practiced this. When you decide to put some offense, such as passing somebody's guard, you can select which side you're going, right? Even if you decided to pass the guard on the weak side, you can jump over and go back to your strong side control within seconds. But if someone passed your guard and you're stuck underneath the knee on belly or the side control position, you don't get to choose where they're going to go, left or right. So maybe someone is a left-handed person and they're going to pass on your weaker side control escape side. And if you've never practiced that, you're stuck in the mud, right? So it's really important to practice escapes on both sides, definitely. Now, I hope that answered your question. That was a great question, guys. If you have more questions like this, I'd be happy to make tutorial videos and YouTube videos on this channel, just talking and maybe talk about mindset and what I think about certain things martial arts related. And yeah, happy to. So guys, more questions, leave them in the comment section below or just send me a DM. I'll be happy to answer. Guys, until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.